The climate crisis threatens to undo the last 50 years of progress in development, global health, and poverty reduction, and to further widen existing health inequalities between and within populations, according to a 2023 article by the World Health Organization. Climate change is defined as long-term changes in weather patterns. These shifts are originally caused by natural factors from changes in the sun's activity, but for decades, human activities have been the primary factors in this global phenomenon. In today's world, climate change is continuing to be one of the most pressing challenges we face, and it is continuing to affect all of us in detrimental ways. It is crucial that we advocate for stricter policies and regulations to be implemented so we don't continue destroying our environment. Climate change affects all of us in some way, but there are policies that we can enact to lessen the harms. As this crisis intensifies, it becomes even more urgent that we advocate for stronger policies and regulations to mitigate its impacts. Climate change remains one of the most urgent challenges of our times, impacting all of us in severe and lasting ways. It is essential that we push for stronger policies and regulations to prevent further change to our planet. These changes are directly tied to a number of factors, including greenhouse gases, emissions, deforestation, and government policies. Greenhouse gas emissions, most notably from fossil fuels, are the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions from human activities in the United States, primarily used for electricity, heat, and transportation needs, according to a 2024 article by the Environmental Protection Agency. Anna Swanson of the New York Times says transportation is a leading factor in air pollution from petroleum fuel releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. It isn't the only cars and trucks, but large ships used to transport goods are responsible for roughly 3% of greenhouse gas emissions. To expand on the negative effects of electricity usage, Jeff Turrentine reported in a 2022 NRDC article that as of 2021, nearly 60% of electricity used in the United States comes from the burning of coal, natural gas, and other fossil fuels. Another article by Turrentine reports logging has led to widespread destruction of forest, wetlands, and other carbon sinks, natural resources that store carbon dioxide and prevent it from being released into the atmosphere. Deforestation contributes 12 to 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions, according to a 2023 article by LSE. Lastly, government policies coupled with the lack of public awareness contribute to insufficient climate change initiatives. Many Americans don't fully understand the full impacts of global warming on our environment because schools are not providing adequate education on the topic. Additionally, some politicians, including former President Donald Trump, have downplayed the negative effects of climate change, often minimizing the harm to avoid criticism or political blame. Although everyone is impacted by climate change, some groups face far more severe challenges, particularly those working in agriculture. A USDA article I read on September 30th, 2024, explains that hot and dry conditions reduce soil moisture, increasing heat stress on crops, which lowers crop yields and generates less revenue for farmers. The effects climate change has on plants and crops are apparent in this picture from a USDA 2019 article by Sun Lin Wang, Richard Naring, and Ryan Williams. Changes in precipitation patterns can also lead to water scarcity during peak growing months, causing potential droughts and limiting crop production. Additionally, low-income communities bear a much larger burden despite the fact they play a much smaller role in warming the planet, according to a 2023 article by Jeff Turrentine of NRDC. These climate-sensitive health risks are felt more acutely by vulnerable populations and those with underlying health conditions, as noted in a 2023 article by the World Health Organization. Health vulnerable individuals are more likely to suffer from poor air quality, which exaggerates respiratory issues and increases susceptibility to diseases. We've seen the effects of this play out recently through severe weather damage. Natural disaster frequency levels have risen in the past few years, with the eastern North Pacific hurricane season facing above average activity with 17 storms, including 10 hurricanes, and the Atlantic Ocean hurricane season was above average with 20 storms, including 7 hurricanes, according to a 23 statistic by NOAA. Hurricanes aren't the only natural disasters where we've noticed an increase. In California, wildfires burned more than 4 million acres in 2020, an area larger than Connecticut, making 2020 the biggest fire season in state history, as noted by Earth Justice 2024 article. This photo from a 2021 New York Times article by Kendra Pierre Lewis and John Schwartz shows a firefighter battling the Creek Fire in Mandara County, California in September. Our economy has also felt the effects of climate change. Natural disasters cost millions of dollars in response efforts, from sending in the National Guard, cleanup crew, first responders, electricity restoration, and setting up temporary living for those deeply affected. According to a 2024 article by AccuWeather, spending efforts in economic loss from Helene in the U.S. were between $95 and $110 billion. There are several structural and societal barriers preventing the enactment of effective climate change policies. One of the main obstacles is a lack of individual willingness to consider differing viewpoints, which is often tied to political division. According to Aroni M. Webb and Lauren Kurtz of the NIH in a 2022 article, the Trump administration's actions restricted public access to information that might justify action on climate change. Political ties also play a major role in hindering policy change. High-level government officials often align with powerful lobbying groups such as the oil and gas industries, diverting attention away from the urgent realities of climate change and the detrimental impacts these industries have on the environment. According to a 2024 article by Robert Eccles of Forbes, a Pew Research Center poll shows that 59% of Democrats see climate change as a top priority. This is true for only 13% of Republicans. Technological barriers further complicate climate progress. While technology is vastly advancing, particularly in electric vehicles and solar energy, the high cost of these innovations remains a significant barrier. Only a small percentage of individuals and companies can afford to invest in these emerging technologies, limiting their widespread adaptation. In order for change to happen, it takes more than just civilians stepping up. We need the federal government to pass mandates. One critical step in addressing climate change is passing more laws aimed at federally protecting land and water areas. The first step in this process is for the EPA to collaborate with organizations like the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Organization to establish specific thresholds such as pollution levels, deforestation rates, and species endangerment rates. These metrics will help identify high biodiversity ecosystems most threatened by human activities. From there, these areas will be designated as fully federally protected. This initiative would be funded by a federal conservation fund to manage and monitor the land and water with strict enforcement of fines for violation, including illegal hunting and deforestation. Preserving natural barriers such as wetlands, forests, and coastal ecosystems act as natural defenses against natural disasters. Wetlands absorb excess water during storms, preventing flooding, while forests stabilize soil, reducing risk of landslides, which can harm communities and ecosystems. In addition to protecting natural areas, it's essential to drive a transition to renewable energy. Alternative options are hydro, solar, and wind electricity, as seen in this photo from a 2022 article by Brian Gallagher of Area Development. Local, state, and federal governments should support investments in renewable energy manufacturing by offering tax incentives to large companies that prioritize sustainability. The government can require companies receiving federal funding to source 50% of their energy from renewable sources by 2035 in order to keep receiving these funds. This approach would help large greenhouse gas emitting companies make the shift towards going green. Our economy would also largely benefit from a transition to renewable energy sources. We would become less reliant on fossil fuels, which are subject to price inflations due to natural disasters and supply chain disruptions. Our economy would also become less susceptible to rising gas and oil prices, overall stabilizing energy costs. Lastly, improving public transportation is a key strategy to reduce emissions in cities like New York, where public transportation is a major mode of travel. By increasing resources and funding for the Federal Transit Administration, an agency within the U.S. Department of Transportation, the government can establish a $20 billion federal program to expand and improve public bus and metro systems across urban areas. The expansion would reduce air and noise pollution while overall improving air quality, benefiting all, especially health vulnerable communities. A key aspect of this program is establishing a mandate that all new public transportation will be electric powered by 2035, with funding from both the federal and state governments. Critics often point to the high cost of these policies, which could range from millions to billions of dollars, as a major setback. Additionally, the tight timeline for achieving significant progress poses another challenge. However, similar policies implemented in other countries have shown promising results. Since becoming one of the first countries to implement a national carbon tax in 1991, Sweden has successfully lowered its greenhouse gas emissions by 27%. Although critics believe the tax would stunt the economy, Sweden's gross domestic product has since doubled, according to a CFR education in 2022. In conclusion, our window of time to prevent the worst impacts of the climate crisis is closing quickly. The key to keeping the 1.5-degree goal is reducing emissions by 45% in 2030. Yet, in the last year, global energy-related CO2 emissions grew by 6%, according to a 2022 article by the United Nations Partnerships. Through increased funding, strong mandates, public awareness, and education, we can slowly reverse the effects of climate change to create a sustainable world for all of us.